Joining me now is the author of international bestsellers, including The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, The War on the West, and his latest on democracies and death cults. Douglas, let's start in DC, where Donald Trump is tackling crime to the dismay of Democrats and the media. But look at these crime statistics released by the DC Police Union showing a dramatic drop in crime since the announcement of federal control compared to the 7 days prior. We're seeing robberies down 46%, carjackings down 83%, violent crime down 22%. Who can possibly be against that other than criminals?
Well, the Democrats and other Trump critics, most feverish critics, have all been against this from the very beginning. It's extraordinary. President Trump has a very straightforward thing, which is that DC, should not be allowed to fall any more than any other American city, but also it should be looked after a little bit more than other American cities because it's the nation's capital, because it's the place where people arrive in, statesmen, politicians, businessmen, tourists. And if Washington, D.C. is covered in homeless encampments and is rife with crime, then that's the sort of thing that makes people believe that this is a little symptom or a big symptom of a much wider problem in the nation. And that's the main reason why Trump has decided to have this crackdown. As you've just shown there, it's clearly already working. And I just wish that, first of all, the critics of Trump would occasionally, if he does something that provably works, would give him some grace for it. And secondly, that all of those extraordinarily preachy international figures who believe that he can never do anything right, wonder whether or not they would benefit from the same policies. For instance, I'd have thought that London, where I am at the moment, would certainly be able to benefit from, for instance, the police taking an interest in crime. But no, they don't want to do that. And you just have to think of all of the tourists to a city who will be put off the city and the country for a very considerable time if they experience or witness acts of criminality of the kind that Trump is trying to crack down on in D.C.
Now, you've written in the New York Post about the recent peace talks, the Alaska summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin, and you argue Putin is still up to his old tricks and Trump knows it. What do you mean by that?
Well, the first meeting, the summit meeting in Alaska between Trump and Putin was very, very interesting. The fact that it happened at all was the first point of interest. And the second was that the meeting went on for some 2.5 hours. And thirdly, that the two leaders did come out and do a joint press conference afterwards. President Trump had said that if there was absolutely no deal, he would walk away. Which some viewers will remember is something that Trump is perfectly capable of doing, even at the most high stakes of meetings. In about 2018, 2019, he had the famous summit meeting after the Singapore summit in Hanoi with Kim Jong-un. There was huge fanfare, huge build-up as there had been before Alaska. And Trump realized there was absolutely nothing going. Kim Jong-un wasn't going to budge. And he just walked out of the meeting. Trump just left, and no press conference, no razzmatazz, no anything, just off. So the fact that it went ahead and that afterwards the leaders appeared together is at least a sign that there is something to negotiate. There is something on the table. Putin and Trump said there, or Trump particularly said that there's one major issue which they haven't been able to agree on, and it's the main stumbling block. And the presumption is that that's about whether or not the Russians should be allowed to continue to hold territory they've already stolen from the Ukrainians. And that's a major issue and a major problem that's going to be addressed. But at least the whole thing showed that first of all it could happen. Secondly, and I think, again, a lot of Trump critics aren't giving him credit for this. He by no means sort of fell into Putin's arms, as a lot of people would like to pretend. He was extremely cautious in the joint press conference. He was polite, but he was by no means sort of nodding along and smiling along to Putin. He was very careful. And I think that's because he knows, as of course he would, that Putin is an exceptionally slippery character to be negotiating with. And Trump has, of course, been bitten before from Putin promising things and then doing quite the opposite. So we'll see, but it's at least a start.
It is, and since the Alaska summit, we've seen the European leaders travel to the White House for further discussions. And now, Douglas, President Donald Trump is saying he has begun arrangements for a face-to-face meeting between Putin and Zelensky to discuss an end to this war. Douglas, that would have been thought unthinkable not too long ago. It would be astonishing if that were to take place. And do you see that sort of meeting being possible?
It certainly is possible, and if Trump wants to make it happen, I suspect it will happen. It will be an extremely fraught meeting because not only is there a dispute about the future, about land swaps, prisoner exchanges, and much more. There's also, of course, this fundamental thing which has kept coming across, which came across from Putin in Alaska, which is what were the causes of the conflict? Now, Putin has a sort of a fantastical version of this, of course, where his troops rolled into Ukraine to try to take the whole thing over, to seize it from Nazis. I mean, it's, Zelensky, of course, is in this position of representing a country that has been brutalized by Putin's aggression, totally unwarranted aggression by Putin. And I suspect that's going to be one of the very difficult things, especially, I think, for Zelensky during any such meeting, is that Putin just has a completely counter-historical, counterfactual version of this war. He talked about it even in Alaska, as if the war, he acknowledged the tragedy of the war, but Putin talked about it as if it was a natural disaster. You have to just sort of clear up afterwards. But he is the disaster. Putin was the hurricane that tried to invade and overrun his neighbor. So there'll be a lot of problems at any face-to-face meeting, even before you get on to the issue of how you actually get to a ceasefire and some kind of permanent agreement.
Now to a story by Christopher Rufo, who does fantastic work in exposing the worst of academia. He reports Harvard University's Center for Middle Eastern Studies is co-sponsoring an event featuring Sami al-Arian. This is a man, Douglas, who has pled guilty to, in the past, to providing assistance to a US designated terror organisation that specialises in suicide bombings. What is Harvard thinking co-sponsoring an event like this?
It's so crazy. I mean, Al-Arian is somebody who's been on the radar of a lot of us for a very long time. Why any student in America should need to get suicide bombing instruction or terrorism encouragement from such a figure, I just don't know. And it's utter lunacy of Harvard at this stage when it's involved, perhaps as the most prominent university in America, to be involved in a struggle with the Trump administration over precisely these sorts of issues. It's just madness for Harvard to host something this provocative. But you go back to that root question you and I have talked about before, Rita, which is like, what do these institutions think they're for? Like, what does Harvard University actually think it's for? What do these universities think the purpose of a university education is? Is it that a student should get heavily into debt and have their studies subsidized by the American taxpayer to learn how to do terrorism and to learn justifications for terrorism and reasons for terrorism from terrorists? Or is it to actually learn something practical and develop practical, usable skills that are going to further not only the career of the student in question, but advance the interests and the capabilities and the innovation of the country that's educating them? Like, what is the point here? And it seems to me, as it has to a lot of Americans in recent years, that places like Harvard have just completely lost the plot of what they are actually there to do. And nothing can exemplify that more than something as preposterous as this. They will, of course, at Harvard cry free speech, but you just have to say, free speech is absolutely vital. I spent much of my life defending it, and it is a core bedrock principle. But even without there being any illegality, you have to say, what do you want to use the speech for? And you just can watch. It's not a criminal matter. It's not a civic matter. It's just a matter of watching. And if an institution says, we don't want you to crack down on our free speech, Mr. Trump, etc., you go, okay, and what are you using the speech for? Oh, you're using it to bring terrorists onto campus to educate the next generation. That is an odd thing to do with such a fundamental right, to put it at its lightest.
It is an odd thing to do, and if you're going to claim free speech, then you better be consistent about it, and Harvard and other universities have not been. You can't hardly get a mainstream conservative on campus without all sorts of uproar from the staff as well as the students. So, yeah, the free speech argument rings a little bit hollow when it comes from the likes of Harvard. Now, Douglas, I want to ask you about what's happening in the UK with the Tories. They should be flying in the polls. You've got the Keir Starmer government, they're inept. Labor is flailing, but the Tories are also struggling. They're trailing reform, and their leader is on the BBC talking about getting kids expelled at school.
I was the person who would say that person is copying notes from the other person. I was the tattletale in the class, like getting people into trouble. Because even then I hated cheating, because there I was, I wanted to be first in the class, and I've done all the work. And then there's some people who are copying notes and saying, why should they get away with it? I stood up in the middle of the exam, and I stood up and said, he's cheating, he's the one that's doing it. And that boy ended up getting expelled. And I didn't get praised for it.
Now, I've been an admirer of Kemi Badenoch, but who is advising her? This story isn't endearing. I mean, why is she spending any sort of valuable airtime she has coming across on some dibber-dobber?
Yes, I didn't think that was the wisest story to tell, because as you say, Rita, it's not an enormously sort of humanizing story. To her credit, I think that the reason why Kemi Badenoch told that would have been because she does have, and she has talked about, this basic sense of fairness that she's right to recognize exists in the British people. And I think she's actually right in a way. I mean, it's an unfortunate part of that interview, but I think actually she's right to talk to this issue of fairness. Because a lot of the things that the left have been saying in recent years about a whole range of policies, whether it's minority rights issues, whether it's illegal migration issues or legal migration issues, they talk about it in terms of rights. It's always got to be about, we have to do this because our obligations are under various rights laws, or we can't take this person out of the country abused our country because of his rights, always his rights usually. But there is another way of looking at that, which is actually a more conservative way, which is to say, we don't need legislation, let alone foreign legislation, to make these decisions about the future of our country. What the British people seek, I think, like the Australian people and the people of America, they seek fairness in the system. They want the system to be fair. For instance, that people who have paid into the system are given priority over people who have never paid in when it comes to taking out from the system. So, yes, I agree with you, Rita. It's not the most endearing story. I don't know who did advise her to tell it, if anyone indeed did. But I do think there's a theme of conservative counterattack in there somewhere, which is worth picking up. Because if you look at whether it's street protests against illegal migration or a growing sense that, of the number of people who are not sharing the tax burden, it does come down to that thing of fairness and cheating, the people who do cheat and cheat the system. So, yes, there is something in it.
Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Such a pleasure as always. Thank you.